Listen and subscribe to The Table of Truth on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts. Welcome everybody to The Table of Truth. This is your man Cam. Today we're doing a special episode of Blerdlines. We're going to be focusing on Lovecraft Country and a couple other geeky stuff. With me today is...
Yo, it's Josh. What's going on? Whatever.
And and our special guest.
Getting
Go
ahead of
ahead.
myself here. Jumping the gun. It's D. What's up, everybody?
And yeah, man, we wanted to hop on because all three of us have been watching Lovecraft Country, and it is freaking amazing. If you haven't seen it, if you have not seen it, turn this off right now, go watch it, and then come back and then join in because spoilers abound.
And we cannot.
Yeah, there's no. Yeah, we got to talk about all of it from top to bottom. But yeah, and then but yeah, so with Lovecraft Country, just to get out the way, if we have to make sci-fi and fantasy shows to teach white people about their racism, I am all for it.
Here for it. I support that.
Because that ish is kind of crazy. I like that. So for the first episode, it was it focused on sundown towns, and what people didn't know at the time, if you know some of your histories, if you don't, whatever, but a lot of people started to find out, is sundown towns reference basically when towns across the country that were not safe for black people, and they had huge ass signs being like, hey, once the sun goes down, niggas is getting killed.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's the nice way of saying it.
Exactly.
What's amazing is people don't realize these things still exist.
Yeah,
yes, they do.
And I think that's the part that I like, that the one thing about the Lovecraft, which is cool, is that people would see it on TV and they're like, that's not real, and then they go to the Google using Beyonce's internet and they're like, oh it's real. Oh, it's still going on right now.
Oh, so you mean they're not making it up?
Yeah, but nah, man. So,
hey, racism does not exist in America, Cam.
Yeah. Obama fixed it, y'all.
Yes.
Racial America. Shout out to Barry in the tan suit, hanging out on the island, just chilling now.
No.
Illuminati. But yeah, guys, how do you like? So I think what we'll do is let's do overall impressions of the show itself, but then maybe we can break it down to per episode. So I'll go, D will go with you first, but just like in general for the 3 episodes, like how have you enjoyed, like, or how has the impression of the show left you?
I mean, it's left me with a pretty good impression, and I'm pretty hard to get over. So I honestly didn't know what to expect from the show. I'm fairly familiar with. I had not read Lovecraft Country, the novel itself, but I am fairly familiar with H. Howard Philip Lovecraft and his monstrous racism, which again, it's very intertwined with the sort of historical narrative of America itself. But the show,
Howard Philip Lovecraft.
Yes, Howard Philip Lovecraft.
Full government.
Yes, his full government name. He died broken penniless, by the way, if that gives anyone any solace out there. But anyway, I like the show. I think that it has a really, really strong cast, and for me, that's really been a good part of the storytelling is how well that they're really selling these kind of weird tales, and just the historical aspect of it, the blend of so much iconography from Black culture, and not just as it stands in America, but the ancestral lineage that you see within the story itself. I think it's really palpable. It's really strong, drawing on these kind of horrific elements that are in our past, present, and foreseeable future that we don't think about. And I think the show's doing a really good job of just in this first 3 episodes of just putting that in your face and making it tense and uncomfortable as it should be.
Definitely, dude. Josh, what you think?
I mean, I think the last part is probably what sticks out. The last part of what Dee said is what sticks out most to me. Just HBO shows in general. If I could broaden the scope for just a second, I feel like they've done a great job. Like with Watchmen, first episode of Watchmen out the gate, Tulsa Massacre. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
they're not pulling any racial punches. Like, yo, so this is the racist history of America on display in fiction. So it's perhaps a little bit more palatable, but
Yeah.
nonetheless, because of the type of fictional story they're telling, it still grips you. It still punches you in the face. It's still like, oh yeah, that happened, and oh yeah,
Yeah.
people are actually impacted by it.
Yeah.
And the ramifications of all the things that happened back then are still palpable and tangible today. So that definitely jumps out at me as the beginnings of a pattern with HBO, which I openly welcome.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that was kind of cool because I think you know tying in history aspects into the
Mhm.
sci-fi and fantasy realm gives it a nice layer to play with, and then like we've all three of us have talked about this before, how we're bored and annoyed of like the same story being told over and over again.
Yeah.
The slave story or the butler story or the maid story or whatever, and like we all know that there's rich history that you can pull from. So you know
Right.
it was good that the way Watchmen just, Watchmen didn't have to be in Tulsa. Like that,
Right.
No.
that story could have been told anywhere else, but because it was set in Tulsa, it gave it a different layer and a
Yeah.
different level of deepness that made it making it like it was when they picked Tulsa, they're like, okay, we're doing this for a reason because we wanted to make sure that it impacts the rest of the story. And I
Exactly.
thought that's the part that I liked a lot because I was kind of like, oh man, like you guys didn't have to do that. Y'all could have done Kansas City or New York as always or something like that. But by picking that place and setting it with that changed the narrative and gave it a different layer that most people didn't have. Because
Yeah.
again, when that happened, people started looking that up. They're like, wait, Tulsa riots, black people, when did this
Right.
happen? Blah blah
Right.
Mhm.
blah blah.
Right.
And it was interesting too because you know the narrative that they kind of presented was kind of like the Klan was the one that kind of did it, and they got all grouped together. But in reality, it was literally just a bunch of regular ass people that just hate black people, and they went to go
Right.
kill them. That's
Right.
literally the bare bones basics. Um, and tying it into the DC, if you go to Washington DC to the African American Museum, they have a night. They have a I only say nice, but they have a dope exhibit, and they kind of have a lot of things about it. They have a lot of things that's going on. Their struggle to sue and get reparations from that situation, which
Mm-hmm.
actually I think recently just I think literally like 2-3 days ago, I think they just cleared another hurdle to actually sue the city and the state for the descendants of everybody from that aspect because they killed like
Yep.
300 some odd black people and
Yeah,
like
they ended entire lines of families. You just got
dude,
to think about the gravity of that. Entire families were wiped off the face of the earth, and they stole their wealth. It
mhm.
wasn't just that they killed them; they took what was theirs and then gave that to their children.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah,
that's that level of deepness is something that people don't really think about. And now tying it back to Lovecraft Country, um, you know, I haven't read the book. I actually now I'm more interested, but I think I'm gonna finish the show first. But I like that, in that first episode, the first episode, 3/4 of the episode, it's just black people surviving racism.
Mhm.
yeah,
like
and it
like it's
starts
straight up period
subtly.
piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it starts from being subtle to just something of as simple as the bus stopping down and Tick realizing that when the new ride comes in, instantly recognizing they're not here for us. He grabs the suitcase of the elderly black woman and it's like, let's go, I got you, because they're not here for us. So it's even from that moment you see what this they set the tone instantly right there.
Mhm.
Exactly, and I thought that was like that. That kind of let you know from jump like where their heads were at, and then another thing that was interesting to me, like I personally don't like horror movies or horror stories. It's not my genre. I respect the ones that are really dope, but I just don't watch it on a regular basis. And for that aspect of the show to kind of bring in, and I actually was kind of like, oh, you already hooked me in with the racism, and now I'm staying for the horror.
Right.
and then and then I was like, oh wait, the horrors happen to all the white people. Okay, I'm really in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
it's very interesting because it kind of is almost like a visual double entendre, if that's even a thing. Maybe I can work it out really quick, but that the racism is the horror, but the horrors are happening to the the perpetrators of racism.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
And I think that is so hard, probably, in if you're just trying to tell that story, to pull off, because one of the things that's interesting about Watchmen and Lovecraft Country, to compare the two, is that Watchmen was a story about where racism exists in the mythology, and it's more of a MacGuffin. And there's a story that involves racism, but it's layered to the point where it's also about more conspiracies than just white people versus black people. The sci-fi goes a little more deeper than what we're in the same sense. Lovecraft Country has a similar vibe in which there's something deeper going on, and it's not just about racism. Racism is a part of the world aesthetic, as a part of that period. I think that's what makes those two narratives even more interesting, because unlike stories in the past have involved people of color, it's always something that is sort of one dimensionally, especially with horror, one dimensional, racist villain, racist storyline, and outcome is the non-racist characters win. And I think
Yeah.
these stories, these two specifically, now Lovecraft Country is handling it a little bit different, that makes being black in fantasy more feel like it's less forced and more, okay, this is how black people exist in these fantasy worlds.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I thought that was the thing that was kind of crazy because here we are. They show they show us our three protagonists, and each one there's a couple things, couple secrets,
Yeah,
couple eyebrow raises, and
yeah,
then I like that they were kind of like, okay, they're very distinctive. They all have their own motivations,
exactly.
and them taking this trip to go to where they need to go to, they're starting to bond because of the trip that they're taking, and then it shows
Mhm.
little pieces of like I like that they gave you that glimpse of because I think the again, most we're in a state, Black Lives Matter, and like what's going on with the protesting and stuff. But I think people really forget that we're literally one generation removed from that shit.
Mhm.
Like our parents, like we're kids when stuff like that used to happen on a
Absolutely.
regular basis, and we as Black people, we have our own racism that happens to us, but we don't have we have a little bit inclination of what happened back then, but like to see it again and done it so and recreated in a certain way where I'm just like, damn,
Yeah,
like in our current state of our our 2020 brains, of course, be like, man, I would knock that dude out, blah 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 blah. But then going back to then and
Back
how
then
they
it
had to
wasn't
like,
anywhere near that simple. Like
yeah,
you might
it
not,
wasn't that
find that.
simple. Yeah.
whew,
And I
that
think that you're right. That's a really good point. I was thinking about that right after I watched this last episode. The scene where Letty, she busts the windows out, and she had enough, obviously, after they burned the cross, and but they all had guns, and the way that resolved itself, I just was almost just clapping my hands in the fact that they, that again, that's show. It's just one of those things that show, if white people weren't paying attention, this is how black people have to live in America. It's not like
Mhm.
that you may look at this as fantasy, and perhaps, yes, it's hyperbole, but it's still not. It's still true.
yeah,
And
exactly. Like the
and
part where she finally had enough. In the scene, this is the third episode, and she moves into a white neighborhood in the white part of Chicago, and they parked their cars out, put bricks on their horns, and tied the bricks there, so then the horns are always going. And so she had finally, a cross got burned on the lawn. She had enough. She grabs the bat. She goes out there and starts breaking the windows. The white people start to come out to see what's going on, and of course they're calling the police. And then Tick and his friends grab some guns just in case shit goes down. And then once they hear those sirens, sister rolls up with her car. They throw the guns in the back of the trunk. Sister drives off with the guns. The police roll up. They automatically drop to their knees, put their hands behind their head.
Yeah, because they already
like not even a question.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that jumps out at me the most about just the overall portrayal of the characters, the world that they inhabit, the thing that I like the most is it's more than a period piece, or it's one of the best period pieces I've ever seen, in that they do a good job of allowing the time period, the environment, the protagonists, everything informs what goes on with the lead characters. Everything informs how they act, who they are, how they respond to the world around them.
Yep.
Everything. And it doesn't feel like you're watching a bunch of people in 2020 portray something that happened in the 60s. You really feel like you're watching something happen in like almost like a newsreel. Like, yo, this is a family that had there's a group of people that had these jacked up things happen to them in the 60s, and you're watching it real time. It doesn't feel like they're just, they're just playing a role. There's a certain amount of life that's brought to it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I noticed too was a lot of the subtlety aspects of it. Like there was a character that owned a bar that was gay. He was getting a blowjob by a dude in the back, and it wasn't treated as like a weird thing. It was kind of like, oh, you just caught someone in a lewd act.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Well, yep. So, anyways, zip. What'd you need? Oh, okay, yeah, you need this. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, he went that way. All right, cool. Next scene. And I like that, like that subtlety in having this fully realized world where, of course, there's gay people. Of course, there's this, there's that. It wasn't treated as this big thing, and I thought that was dope because that kind of again fleshed out the real world of what they were living in. And so, having the earlier in the episode in the first one, they have a block party and everyone's out. The black people are singing and everyone's dancing. And earlier the police had stopped the fire hydrant from water coming out, so the kids couldn't play. And then Tick comes out and reopens it, and like everyone's having a good time. And so and our main one of the main characters, Tick, he was the kind of the nerdy kid that people used to pick on. Goes off into the war, comes back. Niggas diesel now.
Now he's the John Henry Irons of the neighborhood.
Yeah, whoa.
Yeah, he is legend. Like that. He walking tall. Like he just don't need the two by four. But
exactly.
I just wanted to say one quick thing back to the point of you guys had mentioned that we're less than or just about a generation removed. Many of our parents or especially grandparents lived this. They were young during this time, and I was just thinking to myself, it's crazy the different struggle that we go through. But they lived in a time where it was these things were literally the law of the land.
It was commonplace. Yeah, it was everyday life.
It was commonplace. Now you have to think about that. That we have that reaction that, oh, I would have did this, I would do that. But at the same time, you got to think about the equivalent today. Would you hit a police officer? Because that was the exact consequence of a black person, a person of color, striking a white person.
Yeah, it wasn't even you going to jail. You're going to get strung up.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And my mom, she grew up in California, and her parents were from the South. They moved to California to kind of get away from the South, and then in California, they owned a house and all that. So they did have upward mobility more than they would have had in the South, but then they had the more subtle, that liberal white racism.
Yeah.
And so they had to deal with that aspect of it. And so, she was telling me stories about when she was in high school and those kind of things, and as she grew up, and she has both my parents speak eloquently and enunciate, and so they have a ton of stories of having phone interviews or talking to someone on the phone and then showing up and then the person being like, oh, well, you a nigger.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Okay. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. So the position's been filled. Sorry, didn't know that, it's like those type of things.
Yeah.
And they're telling me these stories as very matter of factly. And I'm like, yo.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's wild because coming from a Caribbean background, like to hear my mom tell it, it was just like, she came here at sort of the tail end of the civil rights movement, so a lot of things were already sort of on the mend. But coming from an island where, unless British or Indian people rolled through, you really didn't have to pay deference to anybody. It was just like, everybody here looks like me, and the people who don't, you know, even the white Caribbean people who are several generations living on the island, like, at a certain point it's kind of like, unless, like I said, unless you're British, like as soon as you hear that British accent, immediately there's a whole other thing that comes into play that sort of falls in line with like your parents' story, the story that you just gave about your parents, Cam. And similarly with Indian people,
Yeah.
which is a whole other ball of wax. But, outside of that, you really didn't have to deal with that on a day in, day out basis in the West to the degree it existed. But I mean, because it's majority African descendants on most of the islands, it's tempered. So when you come here, it's like a complete culture shock. And you definitely deal with a little bit of, if I was home, if I was home, man, listen. But you quickly snap to, and you realize like, this is not, the story that I constantly, the end of that story for every one of my elders ends up being, but that I'm here and it's not home, so I can't really rock the way I would rock if I was home, because home might have been on some, I know where you live. But
Exactly.
here you can't do nothing. You like, all right, well, thanks for giving me a shot, and I'll apply again when you guys have another opening, and you might get a
Yeah.
don't bother.
Yeah. And I think also too, even with the main character Tick, and he's formed the military. So and this is around the Korean War. So he's out here fighting in the wars, doing all this stuff, and coming back, and then having to deal with not punching people in the face, because he's like, I know I can break this dude in half, but that doesn't, the residuals isn't worth it.
Yeah.
And so I thought that the way they kept with that subtleness, that's the part that was dope. Now flipping it, now that we've gotten in the world of, hey, racist America, blah 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 blah, then to add in the supernatural into it, it's just like, yo,
Yeah.
I gotta deal with racist white people, and I gotta deal with monsters. Like, what?
Monsters and wizards and of the Lovecraft variety. This ain't
Like,
Tolkien. This is the Lovecraft variety. These are the ones that eat every piece of your body and don't leave anything for scraps.
yo, and I thought about that too, where I thought about that as well, where I was kind of thinking about it, where you know you're dealing with racism and everything else, and then you're now having to deal with the metaphysical world that you can't really explain.
Yeah.
And that part of it's going to be more even crazier.
Yeah.
Because like out here, in the it's 2020 or whatever. If you're in a modern city, these things are going, blah 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 blah. You're living your life, and then this crazy thing happens to you. That you're kind of like not more accepting of it, but you're kind of just figuring out how to deal. Like I was watching Old Guard on Netflix, and then the main protagonist, she's a black woman, she's a soldier, that's what she wanted to do, and then this crazy thing happens to her that she can't really like process, and she's like, what the heck, this is so weird, so crazy to her, but she's still figuring it out as she goes. We're like, here you are in the was it the 50s, and you're already dealing with racism. You're dealing with, you can't do this, you can't do that. You're trying to make sure your family's good, and then you add on wizards and freaking monsters that eat you, and like and ghosts and all this other stuff on top of trying to live in a racist America. Like, yo,
that's a lot. That is a lot.
Exactly. And that's I think that's, as everything you just articulated, is what makes the series so enticing. And whether we go back and look at it and say, well, it was, maybe there was a little more hype than anything, it remains to be seen. But right now, all these things are in play, and it is an experience watching it. I mean, I give all credit in the you mentioned that you're not into horror, and I'm like the exact opposite. Like I'm horror, dark fantasy, all that stuff. And so the thing about that, and when it comes to the visual cinema or TV, film or TV, it's hard to be creative and scaring people, because people aren't easily scared, especially in today's society when there's so much shit going on, so much
Yeah.
real stuff happening,
Mhm.
that you have to find creative ways to make things frightening. I mean, at the core of all of it is the loss of control. But when I'm watching these episodes, I'm like, wow, they find good, subtle visual ways to make you a little bit fearful of what you're about to see.
Mhm.
Yeah, 100%. I think that part is. I feel like there's actual danger as I'm watching
Oh,
it.
hell yeah.
I'm like,
Yes.
I don't know if they're gonna get through this.
Like,
Yes.
yeah, who you don't
Like,
know who's gonna survive, who's not. I mean,
yeah,
and I think the
I
thing
oof.
that's equally that I equally appreciate. There's not even a discussion about who do we tell about this? Like, nobody's gonna believe any of that story.
Right.
There's no one
Right.
you could possibly even begin to share that story, the stories of what they've witnessed and what they've been through. There's
No.
no one who's gonna believe it. So it's not even a
No
discussion
one.
about whether or not you're gonna share it with anybody.
No one. And
Facts.
and that's a subtle uh link to parallel to Black life in it itself. Think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes
If you
to
wasn't there, you didn't know it.
dealing with, exactly, when it comes to trying to talk to people who are not Black about racism and about dealing with the police and about living as in a Black person in America, most of the time people don't believe you. So you
Mhm.
usually have these conversations amongst other Black people and they get it. But to everyone else, you're insane. That's not true.
Yeah.
That's not happening.
That's crazy. Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that layer of it too, because yeah, that's a good, and it's funny because to even parallel with that, like, my siblings, my younger brothers, they've been kind of real blackity black on their socials of lately,
Mhm.
and so and I was laughing because they're church going guys, saw the earth, probably like literally the twins are the nicest people that I know in real life,
Mhm.
and they have a lot of church friends and that kind of stuff, and so their church friends are like, "Hey, you've been real angry lately. Is there a reason?" And
Amazing.
so them being positive, nice people are like, "Yeah, man, Black people are getting killed in the streets. Like, this
Yeah.
shit's kind of serious." And then
Yeah.
their friends' reaction are kind of the typical tropes that most white people say when Black people express Black pain and that kind of stuff. And so they're taken aback because they're looking at these people as their friends that they would understand or have empathy, and they're
Yeah.
just like, "Well, how come you just didn't comply with the police?
Mhm.
Hey, how come he just didn't, XYZ?" And my brothers are like, "Wait, what? Really?"
Yeah.
So they feel like weird because they're like, "Yo, you guys don't believe us? Like,
Yeah.
this happened." Like, and so it was interesting that they had to go through that, and like I think it was a good lesson for them because I think
Yeah.
it reminded them that the two Americas that we kind of live in and that
Yeah.
subtlety and that aspect of it, and then bring it back with Lovecraft Country. Yeah, it's like that. You just saw a big ass monster and you're trying to tell people, and they're just like, "Come on, man,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
didn't happen."
What
And
did
that
you
Like, what?
smoke before you came over today?
yeah.
Yep.
And that big ass monster is white privilege, and
Woo.
Mm.
Woo.
it's the one that both the North and South, East and West, no matter which region you are in, if you're white, you have it and you share it,
Mm-hmm.
whether you want to admit it or not. So that's what that's that monster that they can't that no one believes exists.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. And it was crazy because I um I really like the daughter character in the show because she acknowledges the racism that happens to Black people, and then also acknowledges the being a woman and how that is, but then also being like, but I'm also a white woman, so I got my own privilege.
Right,
Oh
right,
And
right.
so
yeah.
it's like,
Don't you forget it.
Yes. Yeah.
it's like being a woman is hard because people don't think you could do shit, da 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 da, blah blah blah. But I'm a white woman,
Yeah, but
so
remember, I'm
just
a white
saying.
woman, so there's
Yep.
Yeah,
that in it
yeah,
of
yeah.
itself. has it has a whole level of power, not just in America but in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you stories of some of my white lady friends who will tell me stories of like when simply just like crying in a foreign country got them what they wanted, like, or
Yeah.
like just like it's a thing, and people, again, if you don't, you can willfully ignore it, or you can or you can acknowledge it as a fact, but it is a thing.
Well, I think that
Yeah.
a lot of white America doesn't really they have trouble acknowledging things that don't happen to them. And so, I think, Cam, you say this all the time, it America is not a place where people care for, like, caring for the next person is not something that comes naturally. And so
Oh yeah,
until
no,
until
that's
something
yeah,
until something happens to you directly, it's
yeah,
over there and it's distant and it's,
yeah.
uh
It's the other.
it's detached from you. And so because exactly
Yeah,
and because it's the other, it's really easy for you to dismiss and act like that thing doesn't happen
mm,
until it happens to you. And,
yeah,
kudos to any white person who doesn't do that. If you
yeah.
are able to
Very
sit down
well.
and look at the ills of the world, not just the injustices that happen to black people, although personally that is important to me, but just to look at the ills of the world and be like, yo, that's wrong. That should not be happening. You are way further ahead of the curve than most of the people that I promise you, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the for Lovecraft Country, like them kind of going through that, seeing, these three characters having this traumatic experience about almost being eaten, and then, making it past the trees, and then all of a sudden they get to like a mansion, and then all of a sudden this white person was like, "Oh, you're right on time. Here's your room. Clean clothes is over here. Dinner's at 8. Talk to you later." And they're just like, "What?" Oh, you got ran those to monsters? Whew. Yeah, they're kind of pesky, but I'm glad you guys survived. So, anyways.
Mhm.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and it wouldn't. Again, it's if you Lovecraft was Stephen King before Stephen King, so it's gonna get weirder.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing too. I think as you were saying earlier, like Lovecraft, horrible person, but awesome creativity.
Oh, absolutely. He was a he was a piece of work, and not just because he was anti-black, but he was anti-Semitic. He was misogynist, and all those things. He wore all of those hats, shirts, and uniforms. But he was a great writer, and he got more credit after his life than he did while he was living, and probably
Mm.
rightfully so. Person like that doesn't deserve to be put on a pedestal as while they're alive. They need to be deconstructed while they're dead, so we understand that the again, here he is, a great writer, a very he gave us a brilliant genre of fantasy to work with, but better writers have come along and done what he's done, but much better, I think.
Yeah,
So,
no, I agree, and
question
I
for
think.
you.
Oh, go ahead, Josh.
Question for you. Sorry, question for you, D'Angelo. As the
Yeah.
literary scholar between the three of us, how do you think people contextualize and sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The contextualize and sort of come to reconcile. That's the word. The fact that that Lovecraft was who he was. Like, on the one hand, he was this brilliant author who single handedly created and elevated a specific genre of literature and storytelling, but he was also a horrible person. Like, how do you how do you see people reconciling and relating and contextualizing that?
I think one of the things I would say, and this is speaking, taking off my disgust for him as a racist white man,
Mhm.
um, and thinking about him as a literary figure. I would tell people to look at his background. He was a person that was molded into that. He grew up in I believe either Maine or New England, one of those port
Oh,
East Coast areas
you can
where
stop right there. I
well,
got
again, so you put into context early 20th century. You put into
right.
context late 19th, early 20th century is when he basically came of age. He was isolated, alone, didn't have any, and I don't think he had great parents. So naturally, he took all of these sort of inner rages and turned them outward on people that he deemed unlike him.
Mm,
So blacks, any immigrants, Jews, women, like all these things, all of those are the monsters in his books. The way he describes the night gaunts and some of the elder gods of other worlds, they're all, he has a reverence for that darkness. So there's some he had a reverence for it, but it repulsed him, and that's what he put in his stories. So yeah, I would say that you see Lovecraft's background, and you can kind of see that his conditions created his consciousness and
okay.
therefore informed his narratives. If you can cut past all of that, you'll find some really well told horror stories, really moody,
See,
really
I think that's
tense.
and I think that's the dope part, because I think the in the current climate of things, the people are getting challenged about liking a person's art from a horrible person.
Mm,
So the quick easy one is like, oh, this person's canceled, everything they did is canceled, blah blah blah.
right.
But in reality, like, there's people that have contributed a lot to a creative field, but they're horrible people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think us as being as a grown adults, I think we can hold both of those things at the same time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think the younger generation of us is having a hard time with that, because I remember I
Yeah.
had a conversation with someone about Michael Jackson, and they're just like, I can't believe you like Michael Jackson. He's a child molester. And I was like, all right.
Yeah. It's complex.
I told them, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to discount the actions. I didn't watch the documentary. I have no interest in it. But I was like, but at the same time, I also can appreciate the body of work, and also hold in the same sentence that this person might have been a horrible person. And so, the same with Lovecraft. Like, Lovecraft's created, like, literally the stuff that he's created has inspired all the genres of a lot of sci-fi and horror people that people like. And so it's
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
and that's that level of research and deeping. A lot of people don't understand that, and like, that's one thing that I don't like that's going on currently, is like, Beyonce's internet is free, so you can find anyone's inspiration, you can find anyone's reference.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty easy, music, art,
Yeah.
this, that, like, it's not hard.
Yeah.
So
I
the
found
fact that
Lovecraft that way. That's
Mhm.
that's how I found him. I loved Stephen King, and I love Stephen King and Guillermo del Toro, my two favorite writers, authors, and filmmakers. Both are heavily, heavily influenced by H.P. Lovecraft.
Mm,
One's a white man and one's a Mexican man.
Mhm.
One has admitted that Stephen King acknowledges how racist he is. Lovecraft was, but like you said, it's. I don't think you. I think you can separate those things if you are able to kind of compartmentalize it. And I think that it takes a little bit of time and a little bit of wisdom to be able to do that if you like a thing enough.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think that's the thing, like, the elephant in the R&B room, like, R. Kelly, horrible
wow.
human being. Ignition remix, one of my favorite remixes of any R&B song of all time.
Agree.
Period.
I,
Like,
I agree with that.
I'm not even gonna, like, I will dance to it whenever I hear it and can be completely fine, feel all the joy that I need, and then after the song is over, I'm like, damn, that guy's a horrible person.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
you're right, though. I think, going from that level of understanding that you can enjoy someone's artistic work, but also recognize that they're a horrible human being. I think that's something that more mature people that are in the creative field can understand that, and you don't have to defend them either. Like, none of us are defending Lovecraft. Like, that's retarded.
Oh,
But at
absolutely
the
not.
Mm,
exactly. But then we can also be like, yo, man, but this dude, like, literally created a bunch of shit that people that we really respect referenced, and then we understand. So now understanding that deepness informs that. So now bringing that back into the Lovecraft Country, you can kind of see that, like you said, like I don't like horror. I don't have no reference of. I'm not that deep in the horror verse and all that. But then the elements and touches that came in, like in the first episode with these monsters that were literally eating these white dudes, and then you find out they're white dudes.
Yeah.
You're like, oh snap, and to what you're saying about Del Toro. Like I haven't watched his what was his vampire movie or show?
Uh,
Strange.
the
Strain.
Strain, yeah,
Strange.
which is based on a novel that he wrote as well with another author.
Yeah, and I remember he was saying that he was like, I like my vampires bloody and eating people, like,
Yeah.
like not glistening and glowing. And then I was like, oh yeah, it's a Lovecraft theme. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Well, even Hellboy, the great those gods, I forget the name of them, the ones that are like the principal antagonists in the Hellboy story. Those are straight up based on Cthulhu and some of those other unpronounceable named gods from Lovecraft's mythos, from the Cthulhu
Mhm.
mythos, like those cosmic entities that are sort of indescribable, but the best they look like giant cephalopods almost, like that's straight up Lovecraft.
And see, and that's what's kind of crazy. And I think, what's going to end up happening is much like how with Watchmen, people started to learn about Tulsa Massacre and all that kind of stuff. And then with the first episode of Lovecraft, they learned about, the sundown towns. I think the resurgence of people understanding and reading more Lovecraft stuff is going to be very interesting, and how that kind of goes, because, I think I like that the second episode kind of turned the prodigal son trope on its head.
Mm-hmm.
And because like it was interesting watching the second episode. At first I was like, man, this pacing feels really fast.
Yeah.
And then I realized, I was like, oh, that whole prodigal son opened the gateway to immortality is a small part of a larger story.
I noticed that immediately. I was
Like it wasn't
hey, really
like
just gave away the whole farm in this one
yep.
episode. And as soon as I said
Mhm.
that to myself, I was like, it's the one episode. It's the second episode.
Yep.
Oh my god,
Exactly.
how much crap are they gonna throw at us?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. 'Cause
Yeah.
in my head, because I was like, yo, that one episode is usually a movie. Like that would be a good
For real.
90-minute movie.
Yeah.
There's a
Or like a
the
2-hour
secret.
season finale or something.
Yep, the secret society comes in. The prodigal son, we're using his blood to open the gateway to blah blah blah, yada yada yada, and then all this. But then I was like, yo, you guys wrap that up in like 15 minutes.
And the fact that that's not a season finale only gives me chills about what's to
Yeah.
come.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, like I said, don't say it can't get weirder, because if Lovecraft
It most certainly can.
it can get weirder and weirder and weirder and beyond weirder.
And I like that aspect of it, because I mean, even with the resolution of the second episode, and you getting a little bit more, even in the high tense moments and the very crazy aspects of it, then you get even more little touches of like, oh, that might not be his dad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Oh yeah.
some shit went down.
Oh,
why
definitely.
why is there a random Asian lady that's trying to kill him?
Definitely.
Like all these little nuggets that you start to see. And I liked also too how magic was kind of introduced, but it was kind of like, yeah, this is magic. There's wizards, and they're just like, wait, there's wizards? Oh, that's just not good,
Right. And also,
but it wasn't like,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
and it wasn't like, oh my god, there's wizards, magic is amazing. It was more just like, yo, can you put these magical doors down, because this shit ain't working for me right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's so, I mean, there's so many different subtle, I mean, I think I was talking to Josh about the in episode 3 with I love the juxtapositioning of the two different types of religious faith-based magic, if you will, that's present in Black culture. And I think the very notion of magic, of the so-called magical Negro trope, is being challenged, and it's also being challenged. It's being challenged in a way of saying, well, maybe scholars are getting this wrong. Maybe the magical Negro isn't something that should be maligned and dismissed. Maybe it's something that is actually a part of Black culture, because you have all of this divination and these different types of things where you have, again, the juxtapositioning of Pentecostal Christianity with
African spirit.
voodoo or African spirituality, or the Loa worship and things like that, and in the end, those two things kind of merged a bit, because the act of holding hands is basically, that's prayer.
Yep.
But they're chanting the old language and of the and old magic. So I like the fusing of those two things, because I think a lot of African faiths, and again, faith-based, though different parts, not because, again, we're talking Africa, we're talking an entire continent, but a lot
Yeah,
of those things, because they weren't written down and they were passed down orally, fell into being demonized over the years, through the lens of the white narrative.
yeah, and I think that and so we're talking about the third episode where Letty gets money magically, uh, and she buys a house in the white neighborhood, and it's like it. I laugh because like when she's like, I bought a house, and then they showed the house, I was like, that is a ghost house. Like off rip, like I saw the things hanging, I saw the dark clothings, and then when she walked in and things were covered, I was like, oh, something's happened here, because all my brain went back to all the things I've seen in previous movies.
Mhm.
When there's a ghost house, it's usually huge, it's usually
Mm-hmm.
dark. There's
Mm-hmm.
spider web. There's a spider. There's sheets over the furniture because someone had lived there before, but something happened, and so
Right.
I'm like, this is definitely a ghost house. And then as you start to go through it, you're like, okay, yeah, it's a ghost
It's a
house.
ghost house.
And then you're like, okay, it's a white ghost house. Oh wait, there's black ghosts. Oh wait, hold on. And so I like that her mind. The first thing that she went to is she went into research mode, and she went on to because she's already seen crazy supernatural stuff. So she was like, oh, my house is haunted. I got to figure this shit out.
She's
And
also
so
a journalist, which I like that they brought it back to that she's kind of a photojournalist, or sort of amateur journalist.
yeah, and I like that there's that aspect of it was brought in. So again, you see that our strong black heroine is taking charge of the situation, but then also now her profession is bringing it in because she's a
Mhm.
photographer. So she finds it through that. Then she's also a journalist, so she's reading up, putting piecing the things together. And I
Exactly.
thought that part was awesome. And then when they said, "Oh, my house is haunted, we got to get the spirits out." In my head, I'm thinking exorcist, I'm thinking Catholic, I'm thinking Pentecostal.
Right,
So I'm
right,
thinking
right.
she's gonna bring a pastor, and instead she brings like a voodoo priestess, and I was like,
Yes.
"Oh shit, word!"
Yes, and I loved how what you see the white character's face, and they're just like, she's like nonchalantly bringing the goat up to the porch, and it's such a brutal scene, but at the same time, it's like I felt. I liked it. I loved it because, again, there's so much demonizing of that practice in
Yep, yep.
American television and in Western culture
Culture in
in
general, yeah.
general. And of the last 100 years, Black people ourselves have contributed to demonizing that as well. So
Yeah,
uh,
100%.
it was just amazing to see that was, like you said, that was where she went, and the juxtaposition is even more palpable, because how does that episode begin? Letty in church, watching as those church folk around her get the Holy Spirit and shouting, but that's not where she went to save those spirits.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that part was the part that got me because I was like, yo, you've just set up that church is a very important aspect of her life. And it's, whatever. She might be tied to it, but she definitely respects it, blah, blah, blah. And then when she's into a supernatural problem, the first thing is she goes back to more the ancestral type of stuff. And
Yes,
like, yeah,
yes,
and like, boom, cut the goat's neck open, blood comes through. She's like,
yes.
yo, these are protection spells. Y'all need to hold hands. And then what happens? The water comes and it washes the protection away. Right when that happens, the ghost, takes hold of people. So it
Yes.
was really clever that they did that, and I like that. And then even with the resolution where she's about to fight the supernatural being, she knows she can't do it herself. So then she calls the victims or the other black ghosts that are there that had that and they help her. They help together to expel this basically this demon out of her house.
Yeah, that's that.
And
That's
I
that.
was like,
Call forth the ancestor power right there, boy. When you're in battle.
Again, we have one episode of a show that literally could be a movie.
Yes.
Word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It could be a whole fantasy Dragon Ball Z type thing, because that was a finishing move. Call for ancestors, come forth, and then it's over.
Yo, that shit. And then again, like that's that aspect of it too, where I was just kind of like, man, they really going for the juggler, where they're making sure that you guys know that this is blackety black, but then they're also making sure that this is on some horror shit. Like this is like it's not the the Saw horror porn torture porn or anything like that.
No.
Right? These really really steeped into the genres of horror, which comes from ghosts and supernatural and this and that. Like, and then as Josh was saying too, it did feel like almost disjointed after we went through for 2 episodes, and then dropping in said white woman again on some like, oh yeah, I gave her some money so she can get the house. Did she remove that ghost? Oh, she did. Dope. That's what I was wondering.
Exactly. And it was weird, because I think we all felt that watching this episode, because one of the things that I said to myself was like, it feels weird. I hope they're not going to this sort of monster of the week type of thing to stretch this out, because that would be bad. And I know that HBO doesn't do that, doesn't deal in that type of storytelling. So again, it still felt weird when she showed up at the end, and I half expected that was going to be the case when Letty couldn't figure out why her mother gave her the money, and the sister who knew the mother better than Letty did said, well, she didn't have any money. It's like, okay, something else is behind this. This isn't Letty's mother. If that was the whole thing with her, it seriously feels like she wouldn't have had that kind of money to buy a house like that.
Speaking of splashing tons of money on something and you don't know where it came from. That was your
DC Fandome.
That was your alley-oop. Damn. That was your alley-oop.
Did I miss it?
No. That was for Cam. That was a no look.
He's talking about DC Fandome.
That was a no look. That was a no look, son.
That was the segue. Okay.
Yeah.
That was a no look.
Yeah,
keep your eyes on the ball, man. Watch me.
Hey, man, I was enjoying talking about races and white people getting killed. All right, allegedly, this is all fantasy. When I run for office sometime in the next 10 years, I don't hate white people. I just enjoy when they get to go through the ringer. But yeah, so the other aspect of it, we're on to keep this on a geeky level. We got it on Lovecraft. But yeah, DC Fandome popped off this past month, and in light of COVID and all the things that's going down, we're not getting Comic-Cons anymore right now, and usually Comic-Cons are have kind of morphed into these like almost like digital upfronts now. If you don't know what upfront is usually when TV networks would have a particular event and kind of show their slate of shows that were coming up in the next season, and kind of get people hype about it, get some sponsorship. And so DC Fandome basically was kind of like them putting on their own D23, which is a Disney event where they would do that same type of thing. And it was actually pretty dope. Like,
amazingly.
Yeah, like in terms of production value and how they I watched maybe about an hour of it, and they had different panels, and they had Zoom calls, and they had a very interesting mix of multicultural hosts, multi-gender hosts.
International, yes, very
much. International. And they dropped all the good juicy nuggets of like the Batman trailer, and they dropped in the Suicide Squad stuff. One of my friends really hated it from top to bottom, purely because it was the reason why is which valid concern is these things have now turned into TV, video game, and movie events
Mm-hmm.
with little regard to the comics that started that.
Mm.
And I think
True.
they focus, which is 100% true.
Yeah,
They
that's
That
focus
is
very true.
true.
heavily on all media stuff. Like I would say the only comic related stuff was maybe like the Milestone relaunch, which we'll talk about later on. But one artist, pretty well known artist, he had a good comment. He was like, yeah, it really sucked when there you have the director of Wonder Woman talking to Venus Williams, who's doing some stuff with them as well, and they're talking about the character of Wonder Woman and how great she is and all that kind of stuff, and then they're referencing media as opposed to the comics, and
Yeah.
not even thinking about who created it, why, and those aspects
Right.
of it, tying
Yeah.
that in.
I think the
And I
only
think,
comic mention they made was like for Batman, which is like, whatever.
yeah, yeah, no, 100%. And I think, you know, they did a good job of checking all the boxes to make sure they, got all the things that the casual fans are super into.
Yeah.
And the one thing that me and Josh both watched that we both were like laughing our asses off was they did a small interstitial of Batman Beyond.
Oh
So
yeah,
they had
yeah.
Will Friedle, and then they had Kevin Conroy as old Bruce and Terry McGinnis watching a '60s Adam West Batman episode, and they're just like they're just riffing
They
off the whole
went
thing, and it's
in.
actually really, really hilarious.
That's great. That's funny.
But that added that level of fun to it, I think. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think in general though, DC Fandom was pretty dope, man. Like the Flash panel was cool,
Yep.
and Ezra
Shockingly.
Miller was really hilarious, and
Mhm.
they they really showcased the one thing I'd say DC did really good was they showcased the diversity of what their creators are creating. So you
Mhm.
saw a lot of
Mm.
women, you saw a lot of different ethnicities. You had,
Mm.
and these are people that were in, they're the writers, directors, producers, that kind of stuff. So like DC definitely checked their boxes off to make sure they try to be as inclusive as possible on a corporate level.
Yeah.
And then also giving you those little touches of like all the trailers to make you excited for all the stuff that's coming up.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They did it, and they, the comic book thing aside, I mean, the trailers that they dropped were pretty, with the exception of the Snyder Cut, which I'm still blown away that anybody gives two shits about. But that aside,
Didn't
that, that aside,
hey, Sucker Punch, if you turn the volume off and just let it run in the background, it's pretty cool.
stop that.
Well, I mean, anyway.
Good. You bees.
Hold on.
Lucky
We'll
talkie.
do 2 minutes of Snyder slander.
Starting now. Go.
Honestly, I call him Snydick now because I feel like every time he opens his mouth, he has this need to one up himself on the dickish thing he can say about anything anything DC that hasn't touched. Well, at least no, anything regarding the first release of the Whedon cut, if you will, of Justice League. But I feel like at first where there was sympathy for his plight and what he actually went through, and there still is, this whole push to get that fucking cut released, it's just ridiculous. It's going back to what we are talking about with white privilege. It's like this motherfucker is getting paid for his failure. He's getting praised for failing.
Wait. Are you trying to say he is mediocre and he's getting celebrated for it?
He's less than mediocre, and he's getting a do-over. He's getting a do-over for something that was bad. Like filmmakers don't get do-overs. Once you, I forget. I think it was Lucas's whatchamacallit, his one of Lucas's executive producers was like, um, any film, the films are not released, they escape. And I think that's very real. Like I can identify with that. Like and to have a film that's out there, like once it's out, there are no do-overs. Was the
No
thing
do-over
to explain that? So for Zack Snyder to suddenly be able to get this do-over because quote unquote the fans want it, like it's a segment of fandom, but I really can't. I can't conceive that someone actually thought that his version of the movie was going to be this much better that he could get that he should get a do over so that we can see his vision. And I am willing to put money down that it will be worse than what Whedon was able to crank out.
Oh, man, I just but you're right, it goes back to the height of mediocrity, like, you could be a really dope black director and not even get 2% of the freaking chance that Snyder got.
But you can be a mediocre white
Exactly.
guy and fail up.
And fell
Yo,
upward hard.
fail up. Like, I just can't. I'm trying to think. I've Honestly, I've only seen maybe 2, 3 films of his. Like, I watched Sucker Punch on Netflix. I watched, I didn't watch Watchmen because I just couldn't do it. I just nah,
Oh
not gonna do it.
God.
I couldn't do it, man. I can't, like, I've realized this point when it comes to movies now and books that are based off of books or whatever. Like, if I really, really enjoy the source material, I just actually opt not to watch it. I was like, you know what? I really enjoy this book and I like the way it is as a book. So let me just not enjoy whatever the adaptation is.
That's
And
wise.
I've been trying to hold to it because I started this around when The Departed came out. And The Departed I heard is really good. I haven't watched it, but like it's based off of Infernal Affairs, it's a Chinese movie,
Right.
and that movie is amazing. Like literally one of the best Chinese movies I've ever seen. It was super interesting, and I was like, this is really dope. And then when I heard The Departed, I'm like, well, you know what, The Departed will probably be good, but like I like the source material so much, so let me just let it be, and I'm okay with not watching it. And Watchmen, that's how I looked at that. And even with Snyder as well, I'm like, well, I don't really like you as a director, so I don't really trust that you might be able to deliver. So I'm just gonna
Yeah.
be no.
Man,
Yeah. And
I will never forget. It was me, Cam, my cousin, and homie Omar. Shout out to Omar and his wife. And we went to go see Batman versus Superman. We left and needed to go get drinks afterwards. Like
mhm.
no joke, we've been to
Watch the way.
at this point, having gone to the movies countless times with everybody that was there. I can't even count.
Yep.
I can't even count how many times we were like, "Yo, I need a moment. I need to
Yeah.
be able to. I need to wash this away. I need it to be gone,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I
It's
need to
it's that
commiserate with people
future.
who suffered with me. It was
Oh,
that bad, and
Yeah.
I
It's
just
that
feel
future.
like his films have just gotten worse over time.
Yeah.
300 was
dude.
And
amazing, and everything that's come after it has just been a steep tumble downhill.
well, and and
Uh,
and here's my thought on Snyder, because I've seen probably more movies from him than I would care to admit. His first film was a remake of Dawn of the Dead,
Mm,
called Dawn of the Dead, remade from George R. Romero's classic zombie sequel.
mhm.
Um, Very good movie. He did a good job with that. I got to give him credit. If you ever, I mean, you guys don't like that horror that much, but if you ever want to see an interesting zombie movie from like the early 2000s, I've recently had, as a sidebar, this obsession with going back and watching movies from 2000 to 2008, and it's interesting. I don't
Mm.
know where I'm landing on it, but it's an interesting walk down a recent memory lane. But um, 300, I think he was able to pull off because it was all visual. If you look at that book, it's more about the visuals than it is about what's happening in the narrative. The narrative is fairly one dimensional.
yeah,
It's just that it is what it is. But the epicness of the visuals is what he's good at, in terms of that Hollywood style, Americanized, just eye candy. Uh, and then you go on to Watchmen, and he tries to do the same thing, and this is where he hits a brick wall, because now he has a source material that it blows his mind because he doesn't understand it, and it's not the superhero hijinks that he was hoping for. So in other words, Dr. Manhattan is not fucking Superman. He's not comparable to Superman. Yes, he is a I guess you could say a satire, a satirization of Superman, he has parallels, but there's much, much, much deeper. He didn't get to find
The
the
nuance.
layers, the nuances, and so then when you fast forward to someone like Lindelof, and it's like, boom, that's what Zack Snyder did not understand. He took all of these superficial aspects of Watchmen and put it on screen and just gutted all of what made Watchmen so special as a story.
And see, that's the it basically makes him it makes him the David Goyer of freaking directing.
Exactly.
Um,
And he did the
and
same
so
with Batman versus Superman, because that's based on the Dark Knight Returns. Gutted it. Took the
yeah,
visuals.
yeah,
Gutted it.
so crazy, man. So anyways, Snyder slander over.
Mhm.
Yes.
Got it out our system.
We're better.
There were some bright spots.
But
There were some bright spots to Fandome. I mean, the Wonder Woman
yeah,
84, the final trailer,
that was
that looks amazing.
Looks great.
yeah, and then also they had the Suicide Squad
Yep.
Zoom little game thing was hilarious.
Yeah.
More because my time at Marvel, I was there for about 2 years, and everyone always told me like James Gunn is their favorite person just
Mhm.
to do anything with,
Mhm.
and like to the point where like they'll literally do if they could pitch something to him, and he usually is like 90% down to almost do anything just because he's just a zany dude.
Mm.
And it looked at the Suicide Squad kind of panel thing, they let him kind of do that. And he's a kooky dude in general.
Yeah.
And they let him be that. And I thought that was dope. And I'm glad that all the Suicide Squad actors kind of participated in and just had fun with it and just enjoyed like that aspect of it. And then when they showed the kind of behind the scenes, you can kind of see the joy and on their
fun.
faces and the laughter. They're having a lot of fun. And like I think that's super important just in general, or it's just kind of like, yo, James Gunn is a fun director. He enjoys what he does. He has a good passion for it.
Yeah.
And then you can see it on the set when how it comes out. So that's where I'm like, oh, dope. Yeah, you let him rock,
Yeah, and he's ultimately great at what he does, and because of that, I didn't even need a real trailer. And just looking at that footage, I'm very excited for the Suicide Squad. Like if he can, if someone mentioned, I was reading some person wrote that they're gonna have a problem with Bloodsport because not many people know him. I'm like, well, this is James Gunn. Not many people knew who the fuck Star-Lord was as of 4 years ago, or the Guardians of the Galaxy for that matter. So if he could take them and make them now household names, people that Disney can make billions of dollars off of through merchandise and all that stuff, I don't think he's gonna have a problem with Bloodsport.
No, I remember when I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. The thing that came to mind after, as the closing credits ran, was Marvel can do anything now. Like, there's nothing they cannot do, and really, he's responsible for that. Like, it's James Gunn can do anything. Like, there's no limit to what he's able to do.
He broke them out of I think a certain idiosyncrasy that they were idiosyncratic visual style that they were kind of going with. I mean, it didn't completely break away, and again, their movies are still very turnkey, but at the same time, with what he did was somewhat different than what the rest of the pack was doing at the time.
No, it's true. I think I was laughing because I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy got announced, and I was like, "What?" Like because I've actually read Guardians of the Galaxy from the '80s. Like I know the original cast. I was excited when Lanning and Abnett rebooted them in 2008. I was reading that, so like I've been a Guardians fan since back then. And the old Guardians, that shit is not good. It's silly. It's not really that fun. And then when they relaunched it with Star-Lord, who was literally a throwaway character, Rocket Raccoon was another throwaway character that had been around in the 70s. They reimagined Drax, who was also like they just took a bunch of throwaway characters, smashed them together, and actually made them like relevant. And I was like, this is dope. So then when I heard they're going to go to the big screen, I'm like, wow, this is Marvel really being like, yo, we can pick any character and make you guys like.
Yeah, absolutely, and they kept proving that time again. With more, not just I think they hit a wall with Captain Marvel. That's another story. I'm not going to get started on that.
Stay on top of it.
Cam loves Captain Marvel. You should definitely talk to him about that sometime.
Stay on topic. Stay on
See how he's
topic.
pivoting away?
I will. Yep. I don't talk about things that I had a whole episode of a podcast on. Let me tell you what grinds my gears.
But staying on topic, I would say that for me, I'm really excited more than anything for that DC is finally embracing their freaking multiverse and not running away from it. We've had these conversations, and now I'm saying it on a podcast. I've said this from the beginning that DC made a mistake in trying to do a singular cinematic universe in the same way as Marvel, a linear one, just like Marvel.
I agree.
Their stories are so much better because of their multiverse, because we know that there is a whole nother version of Superman that exists in a different continuity that is totally separate from prime Superman.
And I think that also too, with that knowledge, you're less forgiving of different characters' actions. And so, like again, we can have the Boy Scout Superman Clark Kent, and then all of a sudden, go to Earth 2, and now it's a black dude, and he's way more diesel.
Exactly.
And you're okay with it. You're kind of like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or
Yeah.
one of the things that DC does really well in their comics is they do multiple versions, different, like you said, multiverses, and stories of post-apocalyptic stuff or this or that. Like recently they did Batman the Last Night, and that was set in the future where Lex Luthor had killed Superman and the whole world had gone to shit, and Batman's been dead, and they cloned him to bring up, like, it was just such a crazy fantastical story. But because I already know that DC has a multitude of different Batmans, I was already kind of like, oh, okay,
Right,
let's
you were
find out
on board
how this is
immediately.
gonna turn out. Yeah,
Right. Which
where
is
I think
sorry. Go ahead.
which is a good thing, because then I'm open to the randomness of the DC universe,
Yeah.
and then I appreciate the main one because then I know that these are these classic characters and have classic tropes and everything else that I'm okay with. So then when you want to explore different stuff, then you can kind of go to these multiverses and still feel like you're understanding what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that's where they need to go, and that allows their filmmakers more freedom to work. And, where now no one has to feel this need to tie everything in neatly, or with if Wonder Woman can exist in her own continuity, and hell, maybe there's another Wonder Woman that exists in a whole nother continuity, and Joker, Joaquin Phoenix's wackadoo character can exist in his own sort of separate continuity, and they all still be under the same umbrella. I mean, it just makes sense, and it gives them so much more room to work with. I mean, who's not excited about Keaton Batman coming back? And hopefully that'll open the door for what we really want, which is him to be Bruce Wayne in Batman Beyond.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's that part where, again, I am not a Batman fan.
Yeah.
But I can understand, and I like the different stories that are told with them, and then I understand the basic tenet of Batman. So like you said, if we're in a verse where Batman is in a different way because of certain things that happen, I'm all on board, because I'm like, okay, let's cool. Let's see what we can do now.
Yeah.
And I think where I think my frustration with, say, in the Marvel comics is I'm just bored of Peter Parker because he's a kind of a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
And anytime writers try to take him out of his core values, there's a fierce black backlash.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But like, I like that at least the writer was like, yo, man, Peter Parker had been a fucking photographer with a hot ass girlfriend that pays all the bills for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can a dude grow? Yeah, can a dude grow?
Yeah, I mean, and that's I think or what I'm seeing with, I mean, comic books in general. I think DC. One of the things I loved about what DC did with their when they launched DC Universe is they were offering the comic books with that subscription. And those were always front and center, and to remind us people that these stories that we're seeing, visual stories and animated stories are great, but here are where these stories come from, and we got to also still appreciate those stories as well. So many people are saying, oh, why don't they just get rid of DC Universe and just move it to, it's like, no, because it's not just about the TV and the film and stuff. It's about the comic book library that's rich on that streaming service as well. And I give DC credit for still trying to keep the comics in focus as much as they can. But I think to your friend's point with the fandom, is just they kind of reverted to that same thing deal where it's more about uh, what's happening in their televisual world, their TV film world, than it is about their overall world.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's interesting to see how they're kind of going with that, because I think, like I've just finished Stargirl,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mhm.
and that was actually really entertaining. Like
Mm.
it was
I'm
like
gonna have to check
it
it
had
out.
yeah, it had the classic CW silly, airiness that CW shows have, where it's, kind of fun and
Yeah,
little, hey, OG golly kind of stuff. But then
yeah,
because it was on the DC platform, it had a little bit of that realness that Titans had, with a
Mhm.
little
yeah.
bit of that darkness. So there was some death in it. There was
Mm.
definitely some murder. There was like, some interesting aspects. So I thought it was really dope, and they balanced both of them.
They gave it really solid stakes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I
Mm.
think that's the thing. Like the CW shows, you never really feel like the characters ever in trouble or have
No.
any, like,
Ugh.
and that's to their detriment. And then you also have Flash #Barry's fault, where everything is his fault. So
It's
yeah,
so funny because it's true. Everything
yep,
it literally is his fault. I think I
yep,
said that Barry is the primary antagonist of his own show. Like he's
You
like
yep,
have.
Walt, but
You have.
in a bad way. Like Walt is the primary antagonist of Breaking Bad, but in a good
yep, exactly, exactly. That's
Cam has been railing against Barry for quite a few years
Yep.
now. It's
Yep,
hilarious.
100%. One of my coworkers at Marvel. Shout out to Ben Morris, really smart dude, one of the nerdiest comic book historians that I know. We battle about Flash and how I'm like, it is always Barry's fault. I'm like, dude, every episode is Barry's fault. Like that's the theme of the whole show, all the seasons. Tell
yeah,
me one show where it's not his fault. It's always something that he did
yeah.
that comes out to bite him in the ass, and then
Yeah.
the team has to rally together to save everyone because Barry did something.
Well, okay. The only season that doesn't happen is the first season. The
Well,
first
yeah.
Yes.
season is the only season where it's not his fault. Every
Yep.
subsequent season after that, it's because he did something that he did not have to do.
Yep. And honestly, to that credit, Flash season 1, really, really good.
Really
And I
Yeah,
good.
the
think,
first three
Really good.
seasons of Flash are some of the best superhero television you could ever ask for, and
First
then they
season
just
and a half.
down the season. I like the first three seasons. The where they wound up with Zoom was horrible. Like it was just
Yeah,
a
true.
complete.
okay, yeah, you're right.
But
That's true. That's a good point.
everything from Zoom, everything before the reveal of Zoom on back,
Yeah, yeah.
everything was money.
Okay.
First and
I
second
Yeah,
100%
yeah,
season,
yeah.
and
agree with that.
half of the third one. The best two and a
Plus,
half seasons of television you could ask for.
and
I
plus
agree with
with
that.
Tony Todd is Zoom too. That
Oh
just
my
added
gosh.
Hell
extra
yeah.
gravitas.
Yeah,
Like there's certain actors where, like, when it comes to voiceover stuff, I just need them to be in stuff just so
yeah,
you feel the chills. Because I'm like,
absolutely.
when
Hmm.
when Zoom like when Zoom came in, I was like, oh shit, like
Yeah.
I don't know Barry. I don't think you're gonna get past this one, dude.
Yeah, it felt that way, and I think one of the things that was so disappointing about, I mean, the way Zoom came in and handled Barry, and then he broke his back, and then lifts him up, and is like, this is your hero, and he's nothing, and and I was so excited, and
Yeah.
then the next episode. They heal Barry, and that's when I was like, "Yeah, I can't deal with this. There's no
Yeah,
stakes.
Hmm.
none stakes, none whatsoever.
You,
None what's, and I think that aspect of it is something that I think uh like Game of Thrones kind of put that in people's heads
yeah,
on a more of an on a popular level,
yeah,
where like there's actual real consequences to what you do. Like,
yeah,
Game of Thrones, you save a kitten and you get your arm chopped off. So it's like
Say that
And
choice matters, man.
That is one.
yeah,
That is
exactly.
one way to describe it.
Yeah.
You know, and so, and so then when you have like you said, for Flash, like you have a whole show where literally he does things and it's always his fault that that it happens, and then that just lessens the consequences of the show. And then like this past, and again, I'll hate watch it because I'll go and I'll do my thing, which is what I'll do is, especially on Netflix, shows that have previously on, I'll watch the previously on only for the whole season.
I don't even understand how you do that.
Hear me out. Hear me out. So what you do is you watch the very first episode in its entirety, and then you watch previously on for the rest of it, and then you watch the last maybe once the season finale or maybe the one before that. However, you amend it if something on previously on was super interesting. So
And
then
then you
it's like,
double back
oh,
and
that
watch
was
that
kind of
episode.
and then you double back and watch it. So
Yeah.
then instead of watching 24 episodes, you're probably watching maybe 5, maybe 6, but you still get this full narrative of the story.
That's great. You know why? I've been doing that. I told Josh I was doing that. He didn't understand what I was talking about, but you just articulated it very well. I've been doing that specifically with those CW shows. I did that with Supergirl this last season. And that's how I got ready for Crisis, honestly, because I refuse to watch any of those shows. Now, I'm still have to work my way to do. They left such a sour taste in my mouth that I haven't even tried Black Lightning, but everybody I know tells me it's great, and so therefore,
you know what? I'm not gonna say great.
Okay,
what I will say
Good.
is Black Lightning is better than Luke Cage, and the way I say that, we all know that Luke Cage it's not written well.
No,
but the parts that Luke Cage did really well was their casting, was their music choices, their stylistic of how they portrayed everything and all that. So those aspects of it.
Yeah.
So to me, the one thing I liked about Black Lightning, and I one of my other friends, same thing. He was kind of being on it. He's like, "Yo, man, you should check it out." The first 6 issues, I was kind of like, 6 episodes. I was like, man, really blackety black, and they had the song with Black Lightning in the name of the song. I was like, oh, and then and then there's like quotes from freaking Ralph Ellison and freaking Frederick Douglass. I was like,
yeah.
I was just like,
it was hitting all the checkpoints, all of the.
But if you get past that, I think it actually does a really good job of showing a complex Black family in a way that's humanizing as opposed to stereotypical. I like that the villain in the show is not just a very one trick pony type of thing. He's intelligent. He has an interesting story. He has a reason for the things that he's doing. Jill Scott is amazing.
That I will admit.
Like,
that's what I hear.
Like, I
Jill
would
Scott
say
is one of the best things that happened to to ever happen to that show.
I will venture to say she's better than Alfrea Woodard in Luke Cage.
Oh yeah,
And the reason being is because she's such a scene stiller that when she gets there, you're automatically like, oh, well, hello.
Yes.
And you're in it, and so I think Black Lightning, it takes a bit to get going, but I don't feel like I wasted time watching an episode. Like, they touch all the the pieces of Black culture and that kind of stuff, and they do definitely kind of keep it as blackety black as they can. But it's still a CW show, so it still has that kind of air of corniness and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of tropes that are already there, whatever. But I like their casting is really, really well done. And it fits nicely within the CW ecosystem, and it's better that they brought them into the fold, and like how they did their the Final Crisis and kind of put all the shows into one place. I thought that was actually pretty smart. And that's actually going to help Black Lightning, I think, in the long run. And so it's worth watching, but I wouldn't say bump something else that you haven't watched before to get to it. But if you do watch it, I don't think it's a waste of time. And I thought it was actually it's pretty cool.
Speaking of Black Lightning, this is me throwing you another no look pass, but me calling it out now, Cam. So keep your hands up. What did you think about The Rock's presentation for Black Adam? I thought that was the best non-trailer I like it was the best nothing I've ever seen in my life. He
Yeah,
didn't
actually,
didn't give
that's
you
a really good way to put
yeah,
it.
he didn't
That's
give
a
you
perfect
any
way of putting it.
like he didn't give you anything. There was no trailer. You barely you got background on the character, but you don't know what the movie is going to be about, how it dovetails into or out of Shazam, because those two have to meet at some point. Like you don't, he didn't give you anything. He was just like, "Yo, I'm The Rock. I'm gonna be in a movie. It's gonna be called Shazam. This is what the character is about. This is how it went in the comic books, and it's coming soon. Be there."
Yeah.
And I was like,
No,
"Yep, I
dude,
will be
The
there.
that was
I will be there,
the
Dwayne."
Rock
yeah.
the
You said,
Rock says the Rock says
Mhm.
that's the only thing he didn't do was perform it as the Rock. If he had a hit the if you smell la, 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 what the Rock is cooking at the end, I would just faint it and wouldn't have woke up again until that movie was released. Y'all, the thing that woke me up would be hearing that Black
"Take it from
Adam
us,
is now
Bill."
released. Big beard, fro with a bald spot coming down the middle of it. All of it will
Oh,
be my future.
I saw that presentation. I was like, at the end, I was like, nothing, and yet I'm excited.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
absolutely nothing.
100%. And I laugh because it was one of those things where it was kind of like, again, people's affinity for Dwayne the Rock Johnson is very great.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so on top of that, the fact that they partnered with Boss Logic and like his folks that he rocks
Yes,
with,
yes.
yeah,
Shout out to
that
Boss
that
Logic
that
for sure.
just made it that just made it an extra level of meta that just made it even cooler.
oh yeah,
And so yeah, you're right. It was probably one of the best nothings I've ever seen. And nah, they did a good job, dude. That they did a really good job. I
yeah,
think the other aspect of DC fandom that was really dope is they finally gave the official notice of the relaunch of Milestone Comics.
Yes.
And I
yes,
thought that was really, really dope because if you don't know what Milestone Comics was in the '90s, a bunch of really amazing Black creators started their own comic book company with the backing of DC Comics to get basically to start their own universe of comics and their own universe of stories that they can do completely from the Black narrative.
yeah,
And I think that it was super dope because at that time, one, the only type of thing that ever happened was Image. And
yes,
so and so now you have basically Image happening, but with just Black creators. And so they, created their own world. They launched with four different comic books. It was very steeped in Black culture and all that kind of stuff. And I think it really did a really good job at that time being a thing like, oh shit, these are Black people starting their own black comic book company
Mhm.
with major major backing from a major player. So uh, them relaunching it now in 2020 or 2021 actually made it really, really dope. And so that's the part that I thought was really, really fresh.
yeah. And yeah, no, I agree. I think when I saw that news, I was, just really excited because and not don't mean to get ahead of anything here, but um, uh, being a writer, a Black writer, and a comic book fan, Dwayne McDuffie was one of those names that just, he was that dude. He was the
Rest in peace,
person that,
God. Sure.
yeah, yeah, rest in peace for, he was that person that I think if you were a young writer and you were Black, you were looking at Milestone, and if you're interested in comics, you were looking at Milestone and Dwayne McDuffie and what he was doing as the sort of template for where you want to go. And so it was definitely a surprise to me because I hadn't been following it. I had heard rumblings, but the fact that they announced it and it's a go, I'm so excited for
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy, man. I think it actually got announced probably a year and a half ago, and there's some redesigns kind of showcase. And then what ended up happening is it got stuck in kind of legal hell for a little bit, and with that legal hell, they kind of had to iron out some stuff. And I think that's stuff with the Dwayne McDuffie's
it.
estate
Yeah,
and the other artists. creators, but I'm glad that they all worked that shit out.
Yeah, they were all cheery
Because it
on
looked
the
like,
on the
yeah, yeah,
on the
exactly,
fandom segment. They
exactly.
were all.
Yep.
I've never seen all of those guys cheery at the same time.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and
And
it's
that,
perfect time too.
Yeah,
yep, exactly. And so that was a smart move by DC to make sure that that was happening. And also, I'm really excited to see what they come up with, dude. Because I was talking to one of my other friends, and they're younger, so like to them, they grew up on the Static Shock cartoon.
Yeah, same
And so
here.
they only, yeah, so like like that was after I was already a little bit older than that, and I didn't really like check for it. Like I knew of it, but I didn't really watch it that much, so
Yeah,
I didn't really have anything. But I know Static from just the comics and all that kind of stuff. So it's interesting to see those two generations. So you have the older generation, like it was on Milestone and all that kind of stuff, and then you have a little bit younger generation that was on Static Shock because that was their cartoon. It's like
yeah,
Static Shock, Proud Family, like those type of things.
yeah,
So it's really cool to see that, and I think if they can kind of pull it off and DC lets them rock, at least gives them a solid time to get that footing, I think Milestone could be some interesting things happening with it.
yeah. I mean, it was interesting the first go around, and I think just
Hmm.
if it was marketed differently, and I think it was a different time period,
yeah,
I think it would have done more than it did. And I think they're poised. The timing is perfect, and I think they're poised. They're poised to do amazing things again if they do it even halfway right.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think now more than ever we're in a period where more and more black sci-fi fantasy writers are emerging as this is with new and fresh stories, and so there's gonna I can honestly see them having an abundance of material that they where they're just they're really going to if they do it right, I think they're gonna really give take some attention away from the more popular Marvel and DC characters, because those stories are becoming more stale, and we're seeing these rehashing of old narratives of new character. There doesn't seem like it's a abundance of freshness. I'm not totally reading everything, so I'm not going to say that with all certainty, but anything that's, I think, given that Milestone will have its own side of freshness, even though there will be a small segment of people familiar with it. It's gonna be mean a lot for Milestone, and probably for DC at large as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, and I think, DC is a little light when it comes to the African American like books and
Why do
characters.
you say
And
that?
so
What would make you say
so
such
they're
a thing, Cameron?
so I can see them doing a little bit better with this, and this is kind of like their solve for that. And then the downside for DC fandom in general was prior to DC fandom, the Warner Brothers did a massive layoff, like
Yeah,
Yeah,
400
like right
plus
before.
people,
Yeah.
and this was
right
and so
before.
this a lot of their collectibles and toys people, some of the comics people, like some a long time dope people that had been there for a minute to help them get to where they were got let go.
Mm,
And so it was really interesting to see from going from that to flipping it to being like, oh, okay, now this is something else. Like, okay, wow, it was already kind of a negative thing, and then when DC fandom hit, it was like, okay, this is a little bit better, but it still kind of reminded me of that, coming back to that comics and that lack of comics representation at DC fandom just in general. That was kind of like, man, you guys, I get it. You gotta go with the casuals and that whole nine. No big deal. But there's a level of not respecting the IP and where it came from to further other things. Because I think that was my main beef when say Black Panther came out. Like you had all these black people that don't necessarily mess with comics like that,
yeah,
watching a comic book character,
yeah.
and then once they came out, they didn't really have nowhere to go to like further that experience.
Right.
But
Like
then
they
they're
didn't really
making
get.
comments about, oh, well, why can't we get more stories like Black Panther? And it's like,
Yep.
shut up. It's like you don't know anything of what you're talking about, and I think that's the problem with the catch-22 of when these things become popularized by movie and are co-opted by pop culture in general, is that um, that original thing becomes an afterthought because the movies and the TV are more easily palatable
Right.
for the masses. And so, of course, this is why I try so hard often to remind people if it's something that has it's an adaptation of it has a source material and I know of it, I try to say it because you have to appreciate that original work. It's not one thing to just appreciate a Game of Thrones. If you don't know where this is being taken from, then you're not even fully appreciating the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
if you don't understand the sort of the narrative thread that or legacy lineage that some of these things have, then you really are doing a disservice to even the movie world of these things, because
Mm-hmm.
then you can understand how an MCU can exist on its own outside of the comic world because it's created a world that is ancillary to its source material and not just a carbon copy of it.
yeah, exactly. And I think that's the part where, like, the people are starting to kind of see that, where you're starting to see people really, really enjoying something, and then being like, oh, I think I heard it was a comic book, and then, like, delving into those stories. I remember when I watched what did I watch? I watched Luke Cage, and the first two episodes we got to see it as employees for Marvel.
Yeah,
And coming out of it, I was having a conversation with Sanford Green and uh and David Walker, who were at the time writing and drawing Iron Man, Power Man, and Iron Fist. And it was really dope because we had this really good conversation about Black creators and Black comics, and they were kind of just saying, like, now that Black Panther just came out, Luke Cage is out, I heard that Black Lightning is coming in, so there's going to be a deluge of a lot of Black type of characters. Any creator that has their own character and that kind of stuff, now is the time to get your shit together.
mm-hmm.
Get it out, have it well thought out, because now people are open to actually listening to your stories, where before
Yeah,
they're kind of like, whatever, we're looking for Batman clones or Superman clones or whatever.
yeah,
But now you're finally starting to see, like, oh no, people really want to hear, or at least very experienced, Black creators and their stories.
yeah,
And so I'm glad that, like, that's the legacy of things like Luke Cage and Black Panther and all that. And I think I see that that's what's been carrying on, and you're starting to see a little bit more nuggets of different types of Black properties starting to seep in through the to the casuals, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And so that I think that will add to the legacy of those type of properties and stuff like that.
yeah.
And then making the legacy of Black Panther even longer than it already was.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And so, and then I think that also pays homage to our man Chadwick Boseman passed away recently,
Mm.
and that was unexpected and interesting in a respect that, and my dad had put it a really good back. I think it was like '01 when Aaliyah had passed away, and he was kind of like, yeah, when someone that's a celebrity or someone that you identify with, that's around your age group, passes away, it makes you think of your own mortality
Mm-hmm.
a
Yeah.
lot more than you would normally do.
Yeah.
And so, Chadwick was 39, I believe,
40,
and
He was
43.
43. He was
no,
diagnosed
no,
when
40.
he
He
was
was 40.
39.
He was diagnosed when he was 39.
Oh,
He
when he
died
was
at 43.
diagnosed.
Yeah,
Yes, 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 yes.
yeah. So he was diagnosed at 39, and so all of us in that age group between 39 to about 44 were all just like, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but it also made everybody reflect on the type of work that he did, the type of legacy that he's leaving behind,
Yeah.
and to also look at it in a very positive light. I thought that, to me, was actually super, super dope.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think your dad hit it right on the nail on the head. It's definitely for someone like that, and especially when you hear of his story, what he endured while he after he got the diagnosis, and he got it at a point where it was all but you know at that point where he had to do everything he could just to save his life, basically, um and still lost the fight. But he worked during that whole time, and he gave us still Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame, and of course, he only had a few scenes in those movies, but at the same time, though, anyone who's ever worked in production on any level knows what you have to give to even put out something remotely of remote quality. you know,
Mm-hmm.
so for him to do it on that level while still going through chemotherapy and having to have various surgeries, I mean, the man instantly became a myth in his death.
Yeah, 100%,
Yeah.
100%. Because I think, and then also made people kind of check their own selves because we all, and we do live in an era of social media. So when he was starting to have appearances, with he was looking very gaunt and lost a lot of weight. There was a lot of jokes, there's a lot of memes, and again, people not knowing the story behind it, and then now finding out the reason behind it. A lot of people feeling real bad.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
remember when that was happening, which wasn't so long ago because he was doing the
No.
Zoom, and it was at the maybe height of the start of the stay at home
Yeah, the
across the
pandemic.
nation,
Yeah.
the pandemic, and I remember seeing that, and the first thing that thought popped in my mind was, "Oh my, he looks not well." Not that he was doing something wrong or making fun of his because again, having dealt with recently someone who went through hospice and cancer and things like that, and what that does to a person physically, that was the first thing that popped in my mind, and I couldn't believe that people were making fun of him. uh and I know those people will probably regret that and all that, but it, like you said, it should be a lesson to a lot of people to not jump to this whole, oh, they're celebrities, so they're supposed to look glamorous and fit and healthy all the time.
Mhm.
And when they don't, we should make fun of them because they don't. It's like, no, maybe if they don't and you truly are a fan, you should be concerned that they might not be healthy, as was the case with Chadwick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
I
Definitely.
mean,
Yeah.
for me, it I mean, it landed like a brick on my chest. I really just, and I mean that's true for everyone. Like no one outside of his inner circle saw it coming, and it's just, it's, I yeah, it's hard to put into words, like beyond things that I've already said in conversations with other people. But I mean, I think we engage in a certain amount of hero worship, and it just is one of those things where like you realize you realize um you realize that black heroes who I don't want to say don't have a blemish because I'm sure he wasn't perfect, but the Obamas of the world, where like we don't know of anything that he's done that was overtly just like career ending and hero killing for himself, and I think Chadwick wound up being one of those people. And then a couple on top of that, couple alongside that, I mean, the fact that he had this meteoric rise, like he just kept plugging away doing certain types of roles, and he was very specific about the roles that he played. I think Dwayne, shout out to Dwayne Merchant from Table of Truth podcast, as he mentioned that when we potted, and he said he was very particular and very specific about the roles that he took, and didn't just play any old random guy number five, thug number five, or thief number 12 in random movies to get by. Like he was very specific, and to his credit and to our benefit, it fits into the tapestry of things that you can point to as a black person and say that's a role model, and look at what he did and look at how he represented us on screen, and sort of defied stereotypes and defied all the things that people constantly think and hear, that you hear and that people think, and you've heard people say, not only about black people but about blacks in film. And
Yeah,
the fact that the old myth of we don't know how to market that film, and Black people don't really come out to support films like this,
Yeah.
and all these other things that we heard over time that we knew weren't true, but
Yeah.
it's kind of like, dude, you never, like, you can't say those things are facts because you've never done it. You've never put a Black person in a non-comedic or non-goofball or non-coon role or anything along those lines. So you can't say you don't know how to market that film because you've never done it. And now it's been done.
Yeah.
And now it's been,
Yeah.
and now not only has it been done, but it's been done in and made $1 billion in record time.
Yeah, and it's now it's so much not true that it went from being urban legend to just flat out laughably
Yeah, like
ridiculous. Like
ridiculous.
not
100%.
now it's not even it's so not true for everything that you see in television rating spike when you have people of color
Hmm.
involved when in movies it you can make movies you can make money internationally. I think just wanting to not segue or anything, but just mention that there is already talk about what now for Black Panther 2.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, one of the things that's disappointing me with Marvel, and I hate that it's not talked about as much, is that the MCU specifically, not Marvel Comics, but the MCU, is that their diversity or their push for diversity has been up until this point very one dimensional. And I say that to say, knowing that maybe instead of having a conversation about Black Panther 2, we could talk about how do we bring in characters like um, Adam Burchard, Adam the Blue Marvel, a whole
Yes,
different
sir.
type of character whose writer Kevin Griveau is very much alive and kicking, and
Yeah, and
he's
accomplished.
an accomplished and a very phenomenal writer. I mean,
Hmm.
he's
Hmm.
just amazing.
And tell people who he is, just so they, so they have some frame of
So
reference.
so Kevin Griveau, for those of you who may not know him, he is mainly famous for having wrote Underworld, from the 2003 film starring Kate Beckinsale, about vampires versus lycanthropes, werewolves. And that story spawned off into many sequels, and I think there's like some comic book stuff for it as well. But Kevin Griveau then went on to write many comics, and one of the his most famous one is Adam the Blue Marvel, which is about a Black superhero in the Marvel universe, who the his it's a very interesting story. The reason you don't know about him, and the reason the Avengers and all of the white superheroes don't know about him, is because at some point in his story he was asked to not be a superhero in America because that would threaten the fabric of American society. Basically, white people would get in a frenzy and go crazy, knowing knowing that there was a super nigga in their backyard. so, so, so President of all people, President Kennedy, kindly asked him to retire early after in the middle of his battle with his nemesis, uh, um, uh, Blue Adam, his mask is taken off. Up until that point, all the people cheered him, the white folks cheered him, everybody loved him. But once that mask came out and they saw that this guy that's been flying around and moving buildings with his hands is black, oh my God, oh no, no, no! And so and that's his story. But going back to my point about bringing him in, and my charge to Marvel, to the MCU, is that you have these brilliant stories that are not only diverse in appearance, but they are diverse in narrative, and you're not bringing them in for reasons I can't understand. You want to focus on something that, I mean, again, Black Panther is special to all of us, but it's not the only black superhero in play. and not even that Marvel. So, I think that I would love to see them maybe even retire the Black Panther character and just move on to other Black superheroes.
I could see that. No, I think and also in the Black Panther mythos, they have there's a time where Doom and this is what had been alluded, but anyways, Doctor Doom comes and basically breaks T'Challa, and so he can't be Black Panther anymore. So then Shuri takes up the mantle and she's Black Panther for a spell, and like that section was good because the it was interesting because again, Shuri's a different character. She's a different style. He had a different style of how to be Black Panther, and I thought that was really cool. And that's something that's a natural progression. People really like Letitia Wright that
I can
plays
see
Shuri
that.
in the movie.
I would love
and
that.
I could totally see it.
Yeah.
And it would actually work. It'd be fun, and it's a homage to it. It doesn't have to be silly,
Yeah.
And that's something that could actually work. And
welcome that.
yeah, and I think that would be dope. And I think in lieu of that, like I actually agree with the don't cast a new person for the role kind of a thing. Purely for something like this particularly, I could kind of see where like, yeah, let this one kind of be. Normally people will recast the role, you kind of keep it moving, but I think for once, I hope that they kind of don't do that route and they kind of just pass it on to something or something to that effect. So we'll see. I'm curious to see how it all gets resolved, but I agree. I think it sucks that that was like the third thing people would think of, like, oh man, who's gonna play Black Panther next, as opposed to being like, yo man, this dude played some really dope roles, and his catalog really was very specific about who and what he played.
Yeah,
he made sure that he was that he's like that's the nigga that plays everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly. They say you the icon Negro.
Yeah, pretty much. And honestly, to that effect, like I actually didn't mind that because I was like, yo, I think that was his bag. That's what he wanted to do. And as much as we enjoy Black Panther as adults, like watching it, the youngins, like think about it. If Black Panther came out when we were 7 years old, 8 years old, holy crap.
Yeah.
Blow your mind.
I remember,
yeah, absolutely.
Being the elder statesman in the chat on the pod rather. I remember the first time I saw Black Panther, and I was like, this is kind of whack because like you couldn't come up with another name. Like you just had to call the black guy Black Panther, and just the overt the overtness of the homage to the Black Panther Party movement.
Yeah,
to me was just really ham-handed and just kind of like you're pandering.
And Black Panther, the name itself is is like the most superfluous of superlatives. It's like Black and Panther. Panthers are already black. It's
so for me it became a thing where I was like, right, so Black Panther, ignore that guy. And even though he looked like me, and I was very much, even at a young age, a very big advocate for Black superheroes. I was a big I am a big Storm fan. I was a big Luke Cage fan. I was raised, actually, my introduction to comic books was Luke Cage and Iron Man. But as he as time went on and he was reintroduced and sort of reinvented and revamped in the 90s, that was when I sort of I sort of took a second look at him, and him becoming almost like the guy who would just show up and things, like when it became a thing where like Black Panther showed up in the comic and you're like, oh, it's about to go down. Whatever the story is, it's about to go down. It just got really, really real in a very different way because T'Challa's here. And,
right.
So I think that was a thing that sort of jumped out at me when I was a kid.
Yeah, no, I think that was something that was interesting, and then in the recent years, when this last maybe like 10 years of comics and stuff like that, the pivot to highlight characters like Luke Cage, like Storm, like T'Challa has been interesting, and I think in the newer characters that got introduced, Miles Morales and those kind of things were definitely welcome and really dope. But it was also cool to see that they would take existing characters that just didn't really get that much love and attention and give them some some real actual like I would implore people to check out Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther
Yeah.
run, and it's really really well done. And I think it was his first comic ever doing, and you can see it in the first issue, the second issue. But once he finally hits his stride, then he had tell some really cool stories and really develop some interesting stuff. So, but yeah, man, I think that's that. In a positive note, I think the legacy of a lot of the stuff that he did, whether it was for Jackie Robinson, whether it was for Thurgood Marshall, James Brown, in the Black Panther role, I think the inspiration that he gave to a lot of people, even the younger folks, is something that will live on for a long time. That'll be
For
really
sure.
dope.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I want to, we're gonna wrap this up. Give a little final words. D, you are our guest, so give a short final word before we head out. Go hit me with whatever you want.
Well, I'm gonna start by just saying thank you to both of you guys for inviting me on. Let me come on and rant and rave. I'm always willing and ready and always willing to talk black stuff, nerd stuff, blackity black, as Cam so eloquently puts it. I enjoyed this conversation. So yeah, again, thank you.
Nice. Josh, final word.
Final word. I had something, and as soon as you threw to me, it left very quickly. Rest in peace, obviously, Chadwick Boseman. The comic, the world, the world of entertainment in general will not be the same from Friday on. He left his mark. He left his mark, and he did what he wanted to do. And I'll leave it there. Whatever else I was going to say is not more important than that.
Can I just add one more thing? This is a personal thing to the two of you. Thank you, because I finally embraced Star Trek Discovery, and
oh my man, yes,
it was like a big. It was like one Michael Burnham. It was like one big hug.
Yes, sir.
And from one moment to the next, at the end of season 1, when Enterprise, I can't even say. Spoiler alert. Fuck it. When Enterprise shows up and it's Pike and it's everybody, I'm just like, it's just a big hug. So, and just from everything from that, I mean, wow, just great. That's all I wanted to say. Just add.
I'm waiting on you to watch Picard, son. There's more of that. There's more of that waiting for you.
See, that's another episode, guys. Jeez. Got to do a Star Trek episode now.
We got season 3's coming up, right? So maybe we, if you guys are down, maybe we review a few episodes after they come. Like with the Lovecraft Country, I'd be down.
Yeah,
for sure.
No, we could definitely do that. Yeah. My final word, I would say, piggybacking off the Star Trek. If you haven't seen Star Trek Discovery or Picard, you're fooling yourself. They are really, really good. From a non-Trekkie to a Trekkie, like, you just need to go ahead and watch it because it's just good television.
Yeah.
And I think in a sea of tons of stuff to watch, those are things that I think Trekkies and non-Trekkies alike will really enjoy.
It is standout television for sure.
I just, and just for a quick note on Picard, like, I really, really enjoyed Picard purely because Picard was still Picard from Next Generation, and the world has passed him by.
And you should write Picard.
And that makes it, and that's part of the reason why the show is so good, because everyone around them are like, dude, the shit has changed. You can't be the same old Picard. and that's the crux of the whole show. And it's him trying to help these other characters around him to kind of refine their optimism and their altruism, I think, through the whole show.
In a world that has completely gone bananas.
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm even more excited now because, again, this is a guy I grew up on the Next Generation and in Deep Space and everything after the Next Generation I've pretty much seen. And so yeah,
and I think both Discovery and Picard really reward the diehard Trekkie fan for their fandom, and I think they did a really good job.
As a diehard Trek fan, I can co-sign that 1,000,000 times over. You get so many rewards.
Mm.
And then in a quick note for Star Trek Lower Deck, the shit's fucking
Oh my god,
hilarious.
yes.
Please go watch
Why
it.
we forget that?
Yeah,
Yes.
yo, it the it's the reason why it's so good. And I was funny because my girlfriend's dad is a Trekkie, and we were talking Star Trek, and I was telling him, I was like, the reason why it's good is because at some point in your Trek life, you've always thought about, what about everyone else?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who's cleaning the blood off the floor of
Yeah.
the freaking holodeck when someone gets killed, or like when all this stuff. So I thought they did it's just a funny show. It's very meta when it comes to the Star
Oh
Trek stuff.
man,
So if you just you're just watching it as a cartoon, it's really funny. But if you know any Trek lore at all, they hit it on the nail every
they
single
go
time.
in.
And the main actress, she kills
Yes.
it. Like, it's just so fun. So it just, like I said, I'm at a point now when it comes to television shows where, like, I want to have fun, and I want to be entertained, and like I just enjoy the ride of it. And
Mm-hmm.
Lower Decks is really 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 fun.
Yeah.
Lower Decks is one of the
Um,
most ridiculous things I've ever seen. Like
yeah,
I don't say that with any amount of irony or hyperbole. It is hysterical. It's just it.
yeah. I did not expect to laugh that
No,
much. I was really
no.
like, I didn't think it was gonna be bad, but I was like, all right, let's see what you guys got. And out the gate, first 5 minutes, laughing my
I
ass
was
off.
concerned. I was
Okay,
definitely concerned. I was like, Trek isn't exactly known for nailing humor,
Yeah.
and like it's like can't put it perfectly. First 5 minutes, first 5 minutes, you will be in tears.
Although I will say, Discovery does a really good job of balancing the humor and the serious stuff because the characters are so richly told that
yeah,
much like we made this point about Batman and the way he's used in BVS, in that you don't have to force those humorous things on Batman. You just need to let Batman be Batman,
Yeah, just let
and
him
that
be
yep,
humor will
exactly,
someone else can be
yep,
the funny guy.
yep,
exactly. His
100,
interaction with
100,
Barry Allen alone is funny
Yeah.
because
yep,
these are two different types of people in every way. So
yep,
I love that about Discovery, that as soon as you get to know these characters, the movements and the interaction between Serac and Saru and Burnham and then how when Pike comes in, it's just so seamless, and it's just, oh man.
And that
yeah.
that
No,
was
they did,
that was something that I had major, like I was like, yo, season one is amazing. It's chugging along, and the Enterprise. Come on, man!
Yeah,
Like, you didn't need to
yep,
do that. You don't need to involve the Enterprise, and
you
literally
get
yep,
nervous at
first
first. Yeah,
mm-hmm,
the first episode of season two, after the Enterprise arrives, I'm like, oh, okay, never mind. Sorry, my bad.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
all
No,
that
they
goes out
they
the
dude.
window.
Anson Mount, he does a great job as Pike. Spock came in and fucking killed it, and
yeah.
Michelle Yeoh just like
Yes,
enjoys
sir.
being
But
a
dude,
anti-hero
she
so much.
she is so good.
Yo,
And
she and I it's one of those things where, like, I think I wish that more traditionally quote unquote altruistic actors that play the good heroes
yeah,
play more anti-heroes, because you can
yes,
tell how much fun they
Hmm.
have, and
yes.
they really enjoy, like, okay, I could be an anti-hero for this little amount of time. Oh, I'm gonna freaking chew the hell out of this
Oh
Hmm.
scene.
man, I mean, they were. I mean, it was just everything. Like the appearance of Rainn Wilson as Mud. I mean,
Oh
I
man.
was just it. There was just so, and going back to Anson Mount, that's the reason why I watched Hell on Wheels, because I'd always seen him, like, previews of stuff with him in us. In Humans, I heard was horrible, but there wasn't much mention about his performance. So when I saw him as Pike and he's just nailing the cadence and the beats and bringing his own thing to it,
Hmm.
I'm like, this dude can act.
Yep.
Like, this dude is really nailing this performance. And so that's when I
100%.
went back and watched Hell on Wheels, and lo and behold, once again, he kills it. I mean, just nails it all around. Just a brilliant actor, very underrated.
Yep. Nah, Star Trek in general, man. They definitely, I give CBS a lot of credit because they definitely like let them run with it and just have a lot of fun. And I got my dad, because my parents are the ones that got me into Star Trek, and they
Yeah,
were watching it from the original. So we used to watch Star Trek Next
yeah,
Generation, as a family every episode, and so we used to watch it and sit down and like all that. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise as well. So it was like really, really, really dope.
Yeah.
And then and then also I was gonna say, we mentioned a lot of different Black creators and a lot of different books, and I'll try to make sure I put some of those in there. But like, there's a lot of Black centered comic books,
Yeah.
creators, and someone, I think it was, Kari Randolph. He's a New York comic book artist, and someone was saying like, yo man, after Milestone kind of ended, I wish more people would do Milestone type stuff. And he was like, yo, man, we've been doing that since.
Yeah.
And he just listed a bunch of books that were really dope, Excellence and freaking Bitterroot
Yeah.
and all these other
Black,
ones. And so I think they're Black, Black also. So there's so many really good, Black comic character created and Black creators books that are just really dope. And
Yeah.
so I'll try to make sure I put that in the notes so people can kind of check out some of those books. Because like Blue Marvel is awesome. The Ta-Nehisi Coates' his Black Panther was really good.
Yeah.
Bitterroot, which is by Sam Green and his crew is really, really cool. Monster Hunter set in Harlem in 1920s. Like there's just some really cool ideas that creators are starting to do, and I think I hope more Black people would one support other Black folks that are putting out some really great stuff, but then also just knowing that, like you said, there's so much great Black created art out there and
that there's
creations,
no
and so
reason
now
to support trash.
100%. And
Yeah.
we're at a good point where now everyone's very cognizant of spending our dollars on other Black people and trying to really uplift that kind of stuff. And I welcome when I see really good quality artwork, and that's one thing that I really make sure that I put the time and effort into, supporting those brothers, and sisters,
Yep.
and really making sure that like, yo, this is dope. Let me make sure that I pay and like support it, because like again, we want more of this. I don't want to be in the mixtape phase where everyone has a comic book or everyone has a story,
Right.
and it's just really shitty. It's just
Yeah.
like, yo,
And
man.
also, it's good. These are like, Televia Butler is coming. The stuff they're getting ready to adapt some of her stories. These are quality Black stories that show the nuances of different types of Black people, and not just the one type of Black person that you're always getting in mainstream Western media. So yeah, it's I think with Milestone coming back, and with now there being a more remember Cam years ago at and Josh, this too, when we were employees at that network, we
The network that shall not be named.
yeah, at that network, it was always this conversation about, oh, Black people don't like sci-fi and fantasy and all this stuff. And, I'm paraphrasing, no one said that right out to me, but at the same time, that was the sentiment, that's the idea that drives how Black content is created. And I'm glad that that's starting to fall apart.
Yeah, 100%, man. I definitely agree, and I think that I'm glad that people, as part of the movement of Black Lives Matter and like people being more cognizantly aware of Black people's trauma and all that kind of stuff, people are also starting to understand and really realize like, yo, there's a lot of Black creativity out there. We are the ones that do push the narrative and the creativity of a lot of different things. So now it's really starting to support and uplift those other Black creators that are putting out some dope shit. Like that's my thing. Like this shit is good, man.
Yeah.
Like I don't need a Black Iron Man.
Exactly.
I can find me, I don't need a Black Iron Man. I need another character, Yeah, I don't want it either.
I can
like
use a hardware revival out this month.
I could use an actual Mr. Terrific. I'm just saying.
Exactly. I don't even like Icon, but I want Icon.
Exactly.
See, I laughed because one of my good friends, he was like, I don't like Icon because you mean to tell me there was a Black Superman in slavery and he didn't save us? Okay.
He's a Republican, so that makes all the sense when you add that nugget in.
Yeah, I think that was probably McDuffie's most regrettable thing that he
I
did
agree.
in terms
I
of that
agree.
character. So
Yeah, I agree.
I think Icon has gotten much better in more modern terms in terms of his overall opinion, but he's still a dope character despite all
And
that stuff.
I think that's what we might, next time around we'll do a book club and we'll be like, yo, we're gonna read these selections of stuff
Yeah,
and then have that conversation. So we could do a little swath of Static, we do some Icon, we could do some Bitter Root,
yeah,
and we can kind of have those conversations. But yeah, you're right. That we'll save that one for next time.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
but yeah, thank you, brothers, for having this conversation. It was always really, really fun. And yo, man, Table of Truth, Blurred Lines, and we out.